How do you pay for infrastructure? And perhaps even more importantly, is it worth paying for? Because no matter what or side or where you stand politically, infrastructure projects cost money. Sometimes a lot of money. And whenever large numbers get involved, the debate usually changes. The conversation shifts from what should be done to what can realistically be afforded. Hi, and welcome to my channel, Not in Kansas Anymore, where we focus on policy over politics. If you find this kind of nonpartisan, common sense talk appealing, feel free to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, there's a full PDF of the policy down in the description. In the last three videos, we focused on understanding the system, what infrastructure is, why it matters, and what it can tell us about the overall health of a country. Now we get to the question that always comes next, and that's quite simply, how do we pay for it? And that's a fair question. In fact, it's probably the question that should be asked. Every dollar spent on infrastructure is a dollar that can't be spent somewhere else. Every project has an opportunity cost. Every investment carries risks. So before we talk about funding mechanisms or policy proposals, we should start with a basic principle. The goal is not just spending money. The goal is solving problems. If a project costs billions but creates little value, that's not good policy. But if a project reduces future costs, improves reliability, supports economic growth and activity, and prevents larger problems from occurring later, then the calculation starts to look very different. One of the challenges with infrastructure is that costs are immediately apparent, but the benefits can take often years before it appears. A new bridge costs money today. A modernized water system costs money today. Grid upgrades cost money today. But the avoided failures and the avoided disruptions and the avoided emergency repairs, those benefits are often spread out over decades. That makes infrastructure difficult politically because people see the bill immediately, but they experience the benefits gradually. There is another factor that often gets overlooked. The cost of doing nothing. Because doing nothing is not free. Delaying maintenance is not free. Postponing upgrades is not free. The bill still eventually arrives. And when it arrives later, it often comes at a higher price. This is where many infrastructure advocates make their strongest arguments. Not that spending money is good or bad, but that strategic investments today can reduce larger costs tomorrow. Of course, that depends on the project. Not every proposal is worthwhile, not every estimate is accurate, and not every government project is managed efficiently. Those concerns are legitimate, and they should be part of the conversation. That's why accountability matters, transparency matters, oversight matters, and if taxpayers are being asked to invest their tax dollars in infrastructure, they deserve to know where the money is going and what the outcomes and what outcomes are expected. Now let's talk briefly about funding. Most infrastructure proposals rely on some combination of federal investment, state and local participation, public and private partnerships, infrastructure bonds, and in some cases, targeted taxes or fees. Different plans use different mixes, and reasonable people can disagree on which approach is best. This particular plan uses a mixture of all of this. But regardless of the funding source, the underlying question remains the same. Will the long-term benefits outweigh the long-term costs? That is the standard every infrastructure proposal should be measured against. Not whether it sounds good, not whether it scores political points, but whether it delivers more value than it consumes. And in my view, that is where the conversation becomes most useful. Because once we start focusing on outcomes instead of slogans, we can begin to evaluate the policies on their merits. In the next video, we'll examine where the pushback comes from, why people often agree on the problem and can sharply disagree on the solutions, and why those disagreements are sometimes more complicated than they first appear. So this is where we'll pause this video for today. I hope to see you in the next video in 1 week. This has been Not in Kansas Anymore. Goodbye for now.